Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Ffinlo Costain. Anna Jackson is a mixed farmer from Pink Pig Farm in Lincolnshire. She featured with her father Andrew as main characters in the film 6 Inches of Soil. I wanted to find out how Anna's regenerative transition's progressing, and I started by asking her why she decided to move away from conventional and towards regenerative in the first place.
So actually, it was Dad that started that whole bandwagon. What it doesn't really cover in the film is that we started as conventional farmers, when my grandpa, my dad were farming, and then my dad went on a basically a course and worshipful company of farmers, it's called, and he decided to turn the whole farm around, and he went organic. So we were then organic for 10 years, which was most of my childhood. So I think I got used to the idea of no chemicals, a good rotation, that sort of thing. And then we basically started losing money. And Dad was like, organic, it wasn't as well known, I think, as it is now. And you weren't really getting the premiums that you get now. So Dad just said, we can't do this anymore. We've got 3 young kids, well, we were probably 10 at this, I was probably 10 at this point. He said, we can't do this anymore. We need to go back to conventional. We need to make some money. So we went back to conventional. And then basically, Dad gave me the Dirt to Soil book whilst I was living in London. And I read that without knowing I was going to come back to farming or anything. And he just gave me it and he inscribed it at the front of the book. And because he inscribed it, almost like he did it on purpose, as to be like, I've put love and affection into giving you this book. I've inscribed it. You have to now read it. My guilt kind of kicked in. So I read the book, and then Dad also read the book, but he was also reading other books as well. There's a book by David Montgomery, which is really good. And that sort of kicked his brain back into gear because I don't think he ever wanted to leave organic. He never wanted to go back to chemicals, but he had no choice. He was kind of pigeonholed. So I think this seemed like a really good solution of like, I can look after my soil and our health, and I can also reduce my chemical usage, but hopefully I can keep still making money.
So tell me, seeing as you've raised the issue, you were organic, you went back to conventional, and now you're regenerative. So what's the difference, and why are you happy now being regenerative?
I think the difference is you've got a safety net. With organic, if we had a massive weed burden in the field or something went dramatically wrong, you had no backup. You could lose a lot of money and you'd be in trouble quite quickly. And there was a lots of moments I remember in my childhood where Dad would be really, really stressed. It really affected his mental health. Obviously, we didn't know it was mental health at the time, but looking back, I can realize that. But I think there'll be lots of moments, whereas now we have that safety net of like, we can either lose a whole crop and lose all of our money from that field, or we can use this one chemical, spray it and save the whole field. And I think as much as I hate chemicals and I want to go away from them as much as possible, as a farmer, you still need to make some money. And that's how the farm keeps going.
Obviously, with organic, there is a built-in premium. So is that something that you're tempted to look at again in the future?
I think right now we're happy where we are because I think Dad even said himself, even when he was an organic farmer, the soil health wasn't where it is now. So I think you can have organic farming, but you're not you're not giving the soil that nutrients it necessarily needs. So I think, yeah. And also he said he was doing an audit like every month, and it was really time consuming and quite stressful. So I think maybe that's all changed now, and maybe you don't do audits as much. But I think for Dad, we're quite happy where we are. We've got a bit more freedom than being organic. And I think we can be quite flexible. And we're also we've come away from a lot of the companies that we were using to keep our farm afloat. And actually, the freedom in that, like we're home saving seed, we're keeping back seed every year, using our own seed. There's so much freedom in that as well.
Now, we've ploughed into quite a heavy conversation there straight off, but let's just take a step back. Can you remind us where you farm, how many acres, what you're producing?
Yeah, so we are 800 acres split over 2 separate farms. And I've written a list of what we produce because it's quite a lot. And also I thought this would be quite interesting if farmers are listening to this, how we also desiccate each crop, because I think that's just as important as what you're growing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2 years of grass, 3 years if it's bad land. We then glyphosate off that grass with a mixture of other products within the glyphosate, so it's not as damaging. Then we grow beans, and we're trialing boats as well in some fields. So we've got beans and oats in one field. And then we joker that off, and then we grow wheat. Then we leave that and just put SFI straight into that single farm payment in the UK. And then we glyphosate off that SFI. Then we grow wheat again, and then we put all seed rape in after that, and then we go back to grass. But our rotation is really dependent on what's going on in which field and how much rainfall we've had, how much sun we've had. So it can definitely change depending on what's going on each year.
You mentioned the SFI, the Sustainable Farming Incentive there. How's that working out for you?
So we've basically got, because we were in the SFI pilot, we were sort of, Dad said, if you're not in it, you can't change it. So we decided to kind of give them all the feedback we could. And we've got loads of sort of, some of our fields are not quite square. So to square them off, we've lots of the little triangle corners we've sort of put into a wild birdseed mix or nectar mix. And then we've got some fields like that. We've got one field that yielded so badly that's completely SFI. And then we've got hedges anyway, and we've got grassy field margins and things like that. Because we're doing the boats, we've got companion cropping. We haven't used insecticides for like, a long time. Too long. I can't even remember. So that's absolutely fine. And then yeah, we're trialing other things as well. But at the moment, the SFI is actually going to be part of our rotation, which if we can, we're trying to figure out whether to use an SFI where we can graze sheep, because obviously the sheep are going to be grazing our crops in the winter anyway. So it'd be nice to have like a field where they can rest when we want to give the crops a rest. Or to like have it as like a nectar mix or wild bird seed or that sort of thing. So I think that's still up in the air at the moment. But yeah, we just thought for us, it's like a way of sort of knowing that that field can make money, and it's a nice little break crop, really.
Now, 6 inches of soil describes regen farming in terms of particular practices. For example, minimizing disturbance and maintaining living roots. But really, it's about more than that. It requires a deeper integration with nature, with nutrient cycling and complexity at its heart. What is it, do you think, that makes your farm regenerative?
When I came back, we dug some holes, because a lot of people say, dig holes, find out what's going in your soil. So we dug some holes, and I remember lifting up the holes and I smelt the soil, and it smelt like raw sewage. And I remember thinking, I don't think this is right. I don't think soil is. And so what we did, we then dug a hole in the underneath the hedge bottom, picked that up, and I smelt that, and I thought, this smells almost sweet, is the only way to describe it. So I thought, something's not connecting. We're doing something wrong. And that's kind of, now I go into any of the fields now and it's starting to smell sweet. It's not all the way there yet, but it's getting there. And I think there are like certain things indicators that you can look at where we are starting to regenerate the soil. And that's really exciting. I think sheep have helped a huge amount. There are some fields that we've put sheep on this farm and the other farm where they haven't been for 100 years. So it's crazy to see livestock back into the rotation, and the sheep love it. I've got really happy sheep, and I think the fertility of what the sheep are bringing into is also really important. So we've got a field that's split basically by a motorway, but it's the same soil type, and we actually yielded higher on the field where we'd grazed with sheep than the field that we hadn't. It was kind of like a trial that we did. So I think there's obvious solutions to kind of carry on in the direction we're going with regen.
So how do you actually monitor regeneration on the farm? I mean, how do you know that your outcomes around soil health and water cycling and wildlife are actually improving? Are there things that you're specifically measuring, or is it just a gut instinct?
Every year we do sap testing, which basically is, for those that don't know, we kind of test the leaf, and then we test the old leaf and the new leaf, and then we see what either of them are deficient in, and you can kind of figure out what then you need to spray on. So that's looking at like minerals that aren't chemical based, they're just like natural minerals. So we do that. We also do a gold standard, I'll say that again because my email went off. We also do a gold standard soil test every year. And our agronomist was like, you need to do gold standard. We need to know exactly what's going on. It's really important. And then we also do, what else was I going to say? Oh, organic matter testing as well. So our organic matter has gone up by, on average, 1.8 over 10 years. So, and some of the fields, it's gone up more than that. So I think keeping an eye on that and keeping an eye on what's actually going on in the leaf. And also we, interestingly enough, because I looked this up and I asked Dad before I came on the podcast, but we had a bird survey done and we are the top 8 in the country of species of birds. But that was 20 years ago. And we got an award from RSPB. And Dad has increased the tree population on this farm by 4 acres of additional woodland. And I think, well, over this farm and the other farm, so all together. So I think that must have helped, the increasing. And I think we had a tree surgeon the other day did a sort of an aerial view of the 2 farms. And he said it's really rare to see a piece of land where trees have increased rather than decreased in this sort of year and over the years since Dad has had the farm. So yeah, I think hopefully an increase of habitats, which is, I think, really important. And also, yeah, just monitoring as much as we can. We probably can do more monitoring, but it's finding the time in the day.
And just finally, by rebuilding soil health, regenerative farms ought to become more resilient to extreme weather. How did you cope with the never-ending rain over the last few months?
Yeah, so interestingly, all of our tram lines flooded in most of our fields. But the fields itself, I think because we had living roots in every field over winter, none of them flooded. There are some patches where we've had a sort of mini puddle. But we were really lucky. And it could be that on this one, we have a lot of sandy land, which massively helps. And also we're on the wold land. It's called wold land on our other farm. And that has got some hills. So I think that does help. However, it does have slumps of sort of craters that have made little slumps, and they didn't flood. And all I can think is that it's our system that we're doing that means we're more resilient to the amount of rainfall that we've seen. And I'm hoping it's also holding that water in for I'm presuming we're going to have a drought, because I wouldn't be surprised if we did with these extreme weathers nowadays. But yeah, I think living roots is super important, and it has really helped. For example, nobody in our area has been able to drill anything into the ground since, well, we were supposed to drill beans in February, and basically people are drilling beans now, and if they can get in the ground, just because it's been so wet. However, we managed to drill our beans because we drilled it into an old grass crop that we grew grass for seed, and then we drilled these beans in. But no one else could drill. No one else could travel.
And this was back in February.
We drilled them in March, beginning of March, and we were able to get them in. And it was incredible because we were like driving on this soil that should have been completely waterlogged, like next door neighbour's farm was, covered in water, and it should have been completely waterlogged. And we were just driving through this swath of grass and just getting these beans in. And now the beans are like this high, which is really good for this time of year, and because of the year we've had. So I think it's made us way more resilient. And I know lots of regen farmers say this, but I think actually resilience might be the reason our farm survives in the future. And I think it's really important.
That was Anna Jackson from Pink Pig Farm, and the book of the film, 6 Inches of Soil, is now available across the UK. More news on our website, 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.